Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to my channel. Today we are building another build with Sims 4 Moschino stuff primarily, but although this is like a good mix of many packs, a lot of city living. As you can see, we're building on a penthouse in Moschino, and I've been really itching to build something very specific recently, so this is kind of inspired loosely by that idea. So I've been going through a lot of like futuristic Tokyo, cyberpunk, just like futuristic in general art on Pinterest, and a lot of it's been recommended to me, and I've really been wanting to build kind of like a New York City skyline with lots and lots of advertising and maybe like very Times Square-esque or center of Tokyo-esque, but I like the added element of it being futuristic. So I had this idea to do a stacked apartment complex, futuristic, and one of the biggest things futuristically about it is that one of the primary ideas was to cover the outside of the building completely in advertising. So the idea is that in the future, even if you buy an apartment or you're renting an apartment, you still don't own the outside and like the walls and the window space. So this is a very dark, grim future where your future renter or lender apartment complex people are renting the wall space on the exterior of your apartment to advertisers. So the outside of this building is going to be completely covered in all sorts of neon signs, advertising, all kinds of art, movie posters, and things like that, covering the windows, covering any kind of view that you would get. And on the flip side of that, the inside is actually pretty nice. So it is a little grim, and I like that element to it, definitely, but it is like a nice interiorly designed apartment. So we've got 6 apartments. The top floor is actually a penthouse suite, very large. The rest of them are a little bit closed off. They're a little smaller. Some of them are bigger than others. They are all very strategically designed on the inside to work with this sort of diagonal stacked structure that we've got going on and make the stairs work and have the hallways work. And there's even an office downstairs. Now, of course, I cut some of that out for time, as I usually do. This is a pretty long video in and of itself, and it would have been even longer if I included the hallways and the office design, but it is very simple, and you will see it in the background of the video when we go through and decorate a couple of these apartments and use some of the futuristic items that we have in game, although we don't have too many. And I don't know why or how this really relates to Moschino stuff. It probably doesn't in any kind of regard, but there was 2 ideas that came to mind when I saw Moschino stuff, and it was obviously industrial, and the other one was like cyberpunk. So I would really love a pack completely centered around like a futuristic, grim, cyberpunky type of thing, and lots of neon signs, lots of futuristic technology, and clean white lines on walls and things like that. So this is basically an accumulation of all of that, and the best that I could pull off with what we have currently in-game, not using any custom content. The exterior of this build is actually based off of a Lego structure that I came across on Pinterest. I was trying to find a reference photo for some apartments that were stacked in this very kind of chaotic diagonal way, just to give it that futuristic element. Originally, like, I kind of wanted to go just very straightforward, do a very tall skyscraper-esque box, but considering we're building on the top of like a larger building, and this is the penthouse, I just wanted to do something a little bit more interesting with the aesthetics of the outside especially, and just landscaping around it in general too, trying to do something a little bit interesting and not so modern looking, because I think if you go very straightforward, clean lines, boxed out, you are going to end up having it look kind of modern, and maybe doing it in this diagonal sort of way gives it that futuristic vibe. So yeah, this is a Lego that I found somewhere on Pinterest that somebody had made. Very creative. I wasn't able to actually get the same exact angles that they had done in their Lego house because of the way that the grid is designed in The Sims 4, so it is definitely a little different, but definitely inspired by that. And then I just wanted to keep it very simple because we are going to be covering the outside of this with so many colors and bright lights and flashiness. There is no need to do anything else as far far as like colors on the exterior. So lots of white, lots of gray. We do have this wall paneling that reminds me of like Japan, Tokyo, futuristic kind of thing, and it all just works really well together. There was even room to do sort of like lipped off little, what would you call those, porches or decks for each apartment, but I thought it would be even more fun if they didn't have access to those, and instead the apartment complex again used that as space to put signs. And you're really going to see what I'm talking about in a moment here, because we are going to go all out and literally cover everything. And I think when you're building, typically one of the worst things you can do is like use a super large window where you're going to get beautiful views and cover it up in any kind of way with like cabinets or counters or a refrigerator. But that was almost entirely the point of doing it in this build, was like, this is a beautiful apartment complex. You're on the top of a penthouse. You have gorgeous views of San Moschino, especially at night, and all of the city lights, especially if like that's your thing. And we're just going to take it all away and cover it all up. And with the exception actually of the ground floor apartment, that is where the office is. So I thought it would be kind of a funny thing if they didn't use any advertising on the bottom floor where the office is, because it is their building, so they don't want to clutter up their own windows and stuff like that. So the actual best apartment in this place is the ground floor apartment behind the office, where you would inevitably also get the least views because you are lowest to the ground floor of the apartment complex. So the worst one is the top one, I would argue, because it has the most clutter, but you do have the largest like penthouse suite. So it's give and take. It's very dark and grim and twisted, and like the future of our world and advertising and all of that like sad stuff that you don't want to think about. But I thought it was funny in a weird twisted kind of way. So yeah, we've got a very basic structure going on. I liked the Lego diagram thing had these posts that were coming off of the top, almost as if they were supports to the upper floor, and I thought it was a cool way to do something aesthetically pleasing on the architecture of the building as well, something different, and then bring it down to the ground floor, kind of close it off, and bring some of the tiling in. I'm basically going to be using the same things in all of the apartments. I'm using the same furniture. I'm using the same colors, a lot of repeating wallpapers and things like that. The only thing I'm really going to be using from Moschino stuff is the one neon sign that we get, and the couches and the chairs. I think that they are probably the most futuristic looking furniture that we have, or one of the most futuristic looking couches. It is also like very modern looking at the same time, but I just thought that it was kind of working its way towards futuristic. So it is probably the best option that we have. One of my big goals as well for doing the exterior and covering this with all of the signs was to try not to repeat anything, and I ended up repeating some things, but I tried to always use like a different color swatch if I was going to do it. Sizing signs up and down when you can. One of the more recent updates to The Sims allows us to now size up and down the neon signs, which is great. So I can not only get a little bit of variety for the color, but I can also get variety for the size as well. And one of the signs I actually figured out does not size up, so they must have missed that in the patch when they were trying to do that. But I was also kind of thinking about the way that colors look on the outside of this building and trying not to clutter too many of the same color in one area or too many of the same type of advertising in one area. So we have like movie posters, we have neon signs, banners, restaurant posters, regular like signs, ones that are just like words. So it was a big mix of trying to put a big sporadic looking feel of all of that kind of stuff all over the place instead of doing everything cluttered together. So a lot of twisting and turning and going around the building and trying to spread everything out pretty evenly, going through some of the actual wall art that we have as well and seeing if I could make any of that stuff work for advertising or if it was close enough. And some of it did work. So I ended up using a huge mix of pretty much everything you can put on your walls in The Sims, and then even carrying some of that interiorly for like extra advertising on the inside as well. I just figured, you know, this is probably one of the larger penthouse suites in the game. It is really high up, And imagine looking up and like seeing all of this advertising. It would be prime time advertising space for anybody in the area, so it just makes so much sense that this is kind of what would happen to us. And I found that that was a huge theme in and of itself when I was looking through art of like cyberpunk future, is just the overwhelming amount of neon signs and advertising, and it's kind of funny. So yeah, doing just a lot of that. It's going to be a lot of repeating and going around and trying to find things that work, things that don't clip into the windows, because you do have the framing around the windows themselves. So I wanted to be able to place signs entirely over the tops of windows, but I didn't want the actual frame of the window to clip into whatever I was using. So I, in that way, kind of had to piece everything together, kind of like a puzzle, and try and find things that didn't clip all the time. Otherwise, it doesn't give that very three-dimensional feel to it. Every once in a while, it was okay. There was quite a few that I used that I didn't really care. Almost like they're stickers that are being placed over the window, or maybe they were there for a really long time and things are just kind of stacking on top of each other. They don't even really bother to remove what was there previously before they sell space and just put something right over the top of it, kind of a deal. And yeah, it did make me realize how many advertising things we have in The Sims, and it actually makes a lot of sense just because we have so many packs that revolve around work. We have actual like get to work, dine out, city living, so, and then now Moschino stuff, a couple of things that could be used, and then base game itself has a lot of like neon signs and things. So a lot of like using all of those packs kind of together, but interiorly it's almost entirely going to be city living and Moschino stuff and base game. So it is not too bad as far as packs go. Probably not too much of bowling night stuff, although I know I did use 1 or 2 signs for bowling night stuff. That actually works out pretty well for that pack as well. And I would say probably nothing from vampires or from spooky stuff, but that is pretty typical in the day-to-day. Like whenever I'm building, I tend to not use those packs unless I'm doing something very specific to that. So yeah, it's definitely coming together here. I'm going to cut at some point and just go to the interior so that you guys don't have to watch me puzzle together all of these signs and get everything to fit and look crazy complicated, because this was actually a very, very long process. But yeah, we are going to be going interiorly, and there's going to be quite a few rooms, but they are all a little bit different. So I cut some of them, and it's just mostly for time, like I've told you guys, but they all generally have the same vibe to them and repeat a lot of the same furniture. So although I did cut a few for time, and we are going to have all of them at the end for screenshots so you can check out what all of the apartments look like, it just got a little bit repetitive, especially with the bathrooms. I think that I showed 2 bathroom furnishings in the whole video and probably cut the rest. They're using, literally, we have 2 futuristic bathtub, or toilets rather, in game that work really well for these builds, and other than that, there was just the same items over and over again. I think that's probably the one thing about trying to do a futuristic type of build in The Sims currently, with the fact that we haven't had a pack that's actually dedicated for it. There is just such a limited number of objects, and you kind of have to use things in a really weird way. One of my ideas to do interiorly was kind of like a smart house diagnostic system. So we have this one sign from Strangerville that is supposed to be a sign that you use in laboratories, that is meant to give you information on whatever the plant thing is called. Mother? Is that what it is? I literally didn't play Strangerville at all. I only used the stuff to build with. But we have that one sign, the blue sign that you can see me moving around in the doorway. And it looks kind of like something that could just give general information of the house, or like a control panel perhaps. So you walk straight in the door and you can set everything. You can set the lights, you can set the temperature, you can get a good like security system going. You could maybe like turn on the stove from there, turn on the bath. It is a total operational like take over your house type of thing. So each one actually has that when you first walk in. Obviously, you can't actually use them. They are non-functional items. So it is just something that I came up with for gameplay fun, to add that futuristic element. And then the other big thing, the like major futuristic thing we have in the pack, we got a floating bed pod when we got Get Famous. And thinking of that, it seems so out of place, and I don't even know that I've ever really used that pod other than I did a Star Trek build of the Enterprise way back when Get Famous came out, and I definitely used that in there, but I did want to use it in here as well in some of the rooms. Some of them are just going to use normal beds, but that is probably the most futuristic item we have in game, so obviously I do want to take the opportunity to use it. If you've never used that item, it's very cool. Your sim can get in and then it actually levitates off the ground. It is so crazy looking. And then we actually have a few more items from Get Famous that are super futuristic. Most of them are set props for the acting career. So you can see in the background of the little makeshift bedroom that I've done, we have those which kind of look like the interior of a ship. But for this instance, I tended to use them in bedrooms sort of the same way that you have like the little control panel for the house. Maybe that is sort of like a control panel for your sleep, and it kind of keeps track of everything while you're sleeping, how long you're sleeping, your health, your heart rate, and when you actually hit REM, and all of that stuff. Just as like something that I feel like people would care more about in the future than we do now, is actually like keeping track of that stuff. And then, yeah, just in general, we have a very limited space in most of these places. Some of them are much, much larger than others, but I did want to make sure that every single one of them was a fully functioning apartment. So the problem with doing apartment complexes, again, is that we can't really use them the way that you would like to. However, if you created a really, really large family and then you lock the doors to certain sims, you can kind of simulate that apartment complex type feel. So there's a big variety here. Obviously, you can pick and choose between the different apartments, but they're there as options for people who would like them. Each one does have a full bathroom with a sink and a shower and a toilet, a full kitchen, full living room, full bedroom. And I think I managed to make it fit in every single apartment, which was definitely difficult. But I think just the fact that this is futuristic, I am sort of keeping it very minimalistic and repeating furniture in these apartments makes it so that there is a little bit more room even when it feels like there isn't. The biggest problem was probably the shape of the rooms, because you have the stacked diagonal look to it, and the stairs add an entirely different complication, trying to get them all to work and not pop up in the center of an apartment and just keep them off to like one side or the other. That was something that made the shapes of the room a little tricky, and some of them, when you go upstairs, have a little bit of dead space, like triangles, where you can't really fit furniture in there, and because of the nature of the shape of the exterior, you end up having weird walls. So I tend to just close those types of things off. You'll probably see a little bit more what I'm talking about when we go upstairs. And yeah, this is probably the one bathroom that I've kept in the video. I might have done another one if it was definitely a lot different, but I'm telling you, I probably used the same furniture, same cabinets from the kitchen to do the sink, same mirror, the big bright round one that does give me futuristic vibes. Pretty much anything that lights itself up, mirrors with light in the back, or anything that glows, like the cubes, I believe, that are from possibly vintage glamour stuff. Those I definitely used here and there. Anything that glows. That screams futuristic to me with the limited items that we have in here. Now, this apartment is probably my favorite one that I've done, just because it is so different than all of the other ones that are in this house. So the actual wall tile that I'm using comes in a beautiful gray and a white, and I wanted to do something a little darker and play with some bright neon colors a little bit better. So for this one, I was going with that magenta-y purple, the electric blue, and then gray, black, and white for the entire thing, and it just gives an entirely different vibe than all of the other ones, being that the other ones use like the clean white vibes. This one is leaning more towards the cyberpunk art that I was going off of, but I didn't want to do every apartment as dark and kind of grim as this one is, so I wanted to do a mix of both. They're both there and available for anybody who likes the difference in them. But yeah, if I was going to play in this building, I think this is my favorite apartment. Most of them are built for single sims. However, I think the top floor one, the penthouse, is big enough for 2 sims, and I think maybe the one directly below it. So yeah, you could get a good amount of sims going in here. and get some good variety gameplay. It's a shame you can't actually change it to be a functioning apartment complex, but the idea is there. And we're using those lights from base game pretty routinely. I never ever use those. They are those tall rectangular lights that have the glowing coming from the back, and they come in the same color scheme that I was using in pretty much all of the rooms. And you can also see just how the signs on the exterior really do affect the view and the windows to a point where it's almost, there's no point in putting curtains up or blinds because nobody can really see in the same way that you can't really see out. So I didn't really cover most of the windows. I think for the downstairs one, I definitely did because they don't have the advertising on the outside of their windows, but for all the other ones, I just felt like it was totally unnecessary, and you can't really see out anyway, so there's no point in putting curtains up. The little bit of light that you are inevitably going to get coming in between the cracks is enough to just not cover it, and not even put up any kind of wall art for the most part. I tried to keep it pretty minimal and not really do that because I felt like, you know, you've already got so much cluttering it up anyway. You don't want to cover it up anymore. So not too much wall art on the windows in particular, maybe on some of the opposing walls. And I did want to do like a little bit of a dining area in here. And I ended up using this glowing cube. It's not going to function properly as a table. It is an end table, so that is definitely more for aesthetics, but your sim can always eat in the living room. They can always go over to the couch and sit down, but I just felt like that would make such a good table. If you could actually use that as a working table, it's more of like a end table, so just put that in the middle. This apartment was really fun to play with the colors as well because of the nature of the color scheme, and it's so out there. Like, I can't see too many people actually decorating their apartment like this, but I thought it would also be fun. Like, in my head, I was kind of thinking that maybe it's one of those situations where the apartment itself is already sort of designed because you do have a lot of repeating furniture, and you've got the same counters in every one, the same sort of bathroom, the same shower. It is more of like a furnished apartment instead of an empty one, so you would probably be paying for just the general space and not necessarily the furniture. So it's kind of one of those ones where you like pick it out of a catalog and they go in and they decorate it the way that you had picked, whatever one that would be. And this is one of the options in the catalog, but people tend to stick with like the clean white lines kind of a deal. So a little bit fun, very dark, but totally fits in with the vibe. And again, you've got the diagnostic house thing over the little desk area, which I believe that is the desk from Get Famous that you can use as like a influencer, YouTuber, video making freelancer. And yeah, now we are actually going upstairs. One of my ideas that I did in one of my previous builds for Moschino stuff, I did an industrial apartment, a factory converted into a small apartment. Definitely not as many rooms as this one has. I believe I did 2 on that one, and this one obviously a lot more. But one of my favorite features of that house was the neon wall with all of the, I just love it. I love the idea of like a beautiful neon wall. I love neon signs in general. Whenever I go out to like a flea market or an antique store, they always catch my eye, and I would love to have one in my house someday in the future. So I loved that idea. I wanted to carry it over. I feel like it does fit into the vibe pretty well. And I was originally creating that area as sort of a bar, but I realized I was running out of room if I made a bar area that large. There was no room for the kitchen, there was no room for the bedroom or anything, so I did have to cut it and use that limited space for the kitchen area when you first walk in, which I find to be pretty typical. Like, you kind of walk into your kitchen area for an apartment complex, so I feel like it still all fits with the vibe and you're able to keep the neon signs. This room and this apartment in particular, I did try and theme them after like personality types, and I think this is the one that is for a musician. So I used some of the wall art from Vintage Glamour, I believe, and then there was a few pieces from Moschino stuff that are slightly leaning towards musician. One of them is an amp. So I wanted to use that in here and then pair it with a couple of the different items that we already have in game, like the microphone. We have quite a few DJ booths. We have quite a few stereos, DVD, music players. Why can't I think of it? Radios, things like that. So I just wanted to use some of those in here. And again, we do have quite an interesting shape, trying to include the bathroom. You can see a little bit of the dead space that I have closed off. It's usually just like a small triangle. And what I'll do is if something is like dead space and I don't really want you to be able to access it or pay too much attention to it, I will not put a light there, so it just looks very closed off and dark, so that you can kind of tell the difference. And again, repeating a lot of furniture. I was going to use a pod bed in here. I think the problem with the pod beds is that they take up so much room. They require quite a few amount of tiles. So for some of these smaller apartments, I just had to use a bed. It made more sense. It leaves more room. I wanted Sims to be able to get around in these apartments pretty easily, even though they are so small and sort of have that tiny home vibe to them. I wanted there to be no movability issues. So the pods had to go for a couple of the apartments. And like I said, probably not going to show the decorating of every single one of them today. And it probably would have gotten a little bit boring if I had anyway. But I did want to show like slight differences, like if anything was themed differently or I did something fun, like in this one with the neon wall, or this one is just overwhelmingly white furniture in general. The downstairs apartment, I use like a good mix of the lighter blue and grays and stuff, but this one is just overblown white furniture. We are using the couch from Moschino stuff there. The glass coffee table, probably the only glass coffee table or coffee table I could use if I'm going for that futuristic look. Even the white TV that I've never even seen a white TV in real life, but it is an option for some of the TVs in game. And then yeah, you have the clothing rack from Moschino stuff. You have the amp. And I think the DJ station is probably from Get Famous or something like that. I don't even know what it is. Maybe it's base game. Things I don't use. Put it on the list of things I don't use. Doing this apartment, I kind of was thinking afterward that I probably should have used more fitness equipment. And that's another thing that I just completely forget we have in game as an option. I was scrolling through the other day, just looking at stuff, trying to come up with like, what am I going to put in my various apartments? And I came across the rock wall from fitness stuff, realizing that I don't think I have ever once used it. And granted, fitness stuff is a relatively new pack for me because I think I bought it like maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. So I haven't had too much use of a lot of that stuff in general. And if I had bought it when it originally came out, probably would have used it more. But I just don't use any of the actual exercise equipment. And I find that to be very funny and very self-telling. So that probably would have worked really well had I used it in a lot of these different apartments in some of those dead areas where I wasn't sure what to do. Instead of doing a bar, like a good treadmill probably would have worked out. So it's something to keep in mind for the future of my builds. But yeah, we are actually moving on to the final part of the build, which is going to be the penthouse suite on the top floor. Like I said, you could argue that this is the best one, but you've just got so many neon signs and clutter on the windows, it doesn't even matter. But this is the largest one, and I did build it with more than one sim in mind. However, the bed is a pod bed, so the beds can only fit one sim, but you can clearly tell that the bathroom is big enough for two. You've got the dual sinks, you've got a full tub. This is the only apartment that features the full tub, both of the towel racks for two of your sims, and then a very large living room, a decently large kitchen. Again, I wanted to make sure I had the home diagnostics thing. This one actually has two, and I thought it would be really fun to put it underneath the TV sort of as a way to keep track of multiple things in the home at once. That's very futuristic as well, as like having multiple screens right next to each other. And then, yeah, the kind of sectioned off, you've got very open concepts in this entire apartment complex. Everything is basically one room, but I was trying to section them off in various ways. Like we do have the posts, those gray ones that might be from City Living as well, that I use to sort of section off bedrooms and break off any kind of wall that I could without actually putting a wall there, without actually making it feel sort of condensed in that way. And then probably one of the larger kitchens in the entire build. those counters, man, I don't know what it is about counters. I really can't get counters to work. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I just find it so weird. Like, the way they clip together, they don't always clip correctly, and I'm just not, I don't know. I'm not going to go off about counters right now, but I was noticing that quite a bit in this build was like cabinets overlapping each other and like clipping over the top, and then you have to manually sort of move them so that they're not overlapping each other, which is weird because items aren't supposed to do that, so I don't know why it was doing that. And then one of the things that counters do is you can sort of see on this, it was definitely bothering me, and you can tell because I covered it up with plants. Whenever you put a counter against a wall, it will create a lip on the top, and it was doing it on this one for the L that comes out, but it was only doing it on the corner, and then it wasn't doing it on the other two, so it creates a different shape. And one of the ways that I will normally fix that is by putting a half wall there, but it didn't work for some reason right there, and I've never had that problem before, so I just covered it up with some plants. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look great at all. It just, when you put counters against a wall, it changes the actual shape of them, and I don't like that. I wish it didn't, so a little bit of a struggle there. And wall art in general, I was trying to find anything that was futuristic wall art. A lot of the other wall arts that I used throughout this build were either neon signs or video game references, even though that's not necessarily futuristic. It just had that pixelated sort of look, so it kind of tied into the vibe. But yeah, there's definitely a lack. Hopefully at some point we will get a dedicated futuristic pack. I would so be down for that. I loved the one for, I never owned the one for Sims 3, but I loved the idea of it, where they had like the robots and they had the other world that you could travel to that was completely futuristic. Although that does obviously create some sort of a complex when you are trying to use some of these items in a regular type of world and not the futuristic world, but I would still love to see a pack centered around future vibes and see what they could do with it. We're already kind of getting the hints with some of the stuff that we have from Get Famous, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is one of the packs that's going to come out over the end lifetime of The Sims 4, but we will see. It remains to be seen. I'm just excited for Realm of Magic more than anything. I cannot tell you how hyped I am. We don't know anything about it, obviously, so I don't know why I'm excited, but the idea of it has just gotten me so pumped. And I'm just so excited to see what they do with it. And I can already imagine the types of things I'm going to build. I'm already waiting. Like, I just want it to get announced so I can start building for you guys, because I have tons of ideas depending on which direction the pack actually goes. So we're finishing off the bedroom, and that is pretty much going to be the end of the build here. Let me know if there's anything else you would like to see me build with Moschino stuff. I don't really know what else to build. If you want my actual opinions on Moschino stuff, I talked about it a lot more in my industrial build. I will link that at the end, as well as my entire playlist of building stuff. Check some of it out if you're interested. And thank you guys all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that little bell icon below to turn on post notifications so you can get updated every single time I post. And I will talk to you all in the next one.